let me introduce to you very dear friends of mine and of ours as a broad family in the nations, Doctors Jason and Jessie Thomas. And we met, I suppose, 10 years ago, more or less. And I still remember the first time I met, I believe I met Jessie first and some of the others from their team. And then soon after that, had the privilege of also meeting Jason. And we began to walk alongside our dear friends here. Great privilege to serve them in their work and together be allowed by God to serve India and other parts of South Asia in the area of theological education and exploring and experimenting in how can we make formal theological education be more life transformational. The things that I have experienced that I have appreciated so much about our dear friends Jason and Jessie is not only are they seriously brilliant, and they are intellectually, academically, they are well recognized internationally, of course, across India and South Asia, but also internationally. They are recognized as very strong leaders in theological education because of their brilliance. But not just that, more than that. This is a precious brother and sister in Christ with very deep relationship with God, very sincere union with Christ, beautiful spiritual lives, a wonderful marriage. This is a couple, this is husband and wife. And I have so appreciated over the years as I've got to know them and walk alongside them, their really beautiful love for one another and their respect for one another as husband and wife. This is a brother and a sister of deep integrity with a clear and passionate calling to serve God and to serve his people and his leaders in the nations. Wow. And very high capacity to do so. And so Jason and Jessie, such a privilege. If let's unmute them both, and please make sure you have your videos on, and let's turn this over to you. And so I know I left out all of the formal things that are normally said in an introduction, but let's see, what should I have said? I should have said that Jason is the head of New India Bible Seminary. He also works with Overseas Council and has a great role with ATA, which is the foremost evangelical accrediting agency for Asia. We're very privileged as well to have some people from Overseas Council and ATA with us on this session. Jessie is just, Jason is also, but Jessie is just mind-blowingly brilliant. She's an author, a very powerful leader, a very deep thinker and strategist, and amazing woman of God. And so welcome to you both. And I'm going to, I'll pop in here or there with maybe some questions for clarification. But Jason, we are over to you right now, dear brother. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. It's my great joy and honor to see you all and also to share our story, the testimony of New India Bible Seminary and also the New India Evangelistic Association's Theological Educational Department story after connecting with the ConneXions model of theological education. And as Dr. Malcolm introduced, my name is Jason and I bring greetings from New India Bible Seminary, Kerala, the pivot theological educational institution of New India Evangelistic Association. Dr. Alex Philip, the executive director of New India Evangelistic Association, and the leadership of New India Ministry Facet, join me to greet you all.
Thank you.
Also, it's my great joy and privilege to share the warm regards from Overseas Council South Asia, a ministry of United World Mission. And this evening, I want to share our testimony, our story, how we could change from the traditional setup to transformative model of theological education after meeting with Dr. Malcolm and his team. And New India Bible Seminary was founded in 1975 out of the deep conviction that evangelization of India is possible only if committed young men and women are equipped in Bible disciplines and evangelistic work. And I have started my ministry of training at New India Bible Seminary in 1987 and assumed the role of principal in 2009. Also, it's my privilege to serve the Overseas Council as the regional director for South Asia. And this evening, for us, I want to share with you how we could revisit our curriculum, syllabus, and the entire training mode into a transformative way using ConneXions model of leader development training. Also, I want to share with you the motivating factors and the need of move from traditional mode to transformative mode. And my wife, Jessie, will describe you later the challenges, the process, and the accomplishments of inculcating this particular model into a formal theological setting. And again, at the outset, I want to stress that I believe in formal theological education and non-formal theological education, but with a purpose. I believe that we need both scholar leaders and reflective practitioners. This discussion of theological training is based on my 33 years of involvement in ministry and theological training. My thinking has been sharpened by my involvement with Dr. Malcolm and his teams and various training centers of Leader Source Ministry in various nations of Asia during the past 10 years. It was my joy and privilege to visit many of the training centers of Leader Source in Asian countries and also to see the transformation, the process of transformation happening with the training of Leader Source. It has also been sharpened my colleagues from Overseas Council, especially Dr. Ashish Kushpal and Dr. Scott Cunningham, and Asia Theological Association, especially Dr. Teresa and Dr. Paul Cornelius, and my colleagues at New India Evangelistic Association Theological Education Department. And I just want to share my screen. Please bear with me for a minute. Okay, so this evening, integrating ConneXions model in formal theological education setting. Often we think that the ConneXions model is only for non-formal, but in a very successful way, with the approval of Asia Theological Association, we could prove that this is an excellent model for a transformative mode of theological education. And we know that what is the need of theological education, especially the formal theological education? Most of the emerging churches in the majority world are made up of first generation believers. And they lack deep discipleship under the lordship of Jesus Christ in their lives. Therefore, the teaching of God's word is important. There is a significant leadership deficit in many regions where the churches is rapidly growing. And the leadership deficit has been quantified by research conducted by the Center for the Study of Global Christianity at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. Over 2 million Protestant pastors in the majority world lack formal biblical training And 90% of churches worldwide have leaders with no formal training. And with the increasing rate of conversions, there's a global need of hundreds of new pastors every day. For example, in the last 30 years, in India, there has been an explosion of church growth through Christian workers who are undertrained, isolated, and have no connection with the traditional denominations and seminaries. These leaders are not being equipped by the seminaries, nor are the leaders of the seminaries well acquainted with the needs and challenges of the emerging churches. This shows the enormous need of training. We need training, there's no doubt in it. But we need training with biblical discipleship, theological grounding, contextual integration, ministerial skill development of church leaders. Therefore, building healthy leaders for the church is the urgent task of all theological educational institutions, whether it is through formal or non-formal, or through an integrated way. So, historically, the term theological education has been used synonymously with the training of leaders for the church. And I believe ecclesiology is central to theological education, and a biblically based and contextually applied understanding of the nature and ministry of the church should underpin the objectives of all theological education. But unfortunately, the vague understanding of ministry, developments in higher theological education, professionalism in ministry training, accreditations or affiliations with universities, and changes in congregational and parochial life have diminished the traditional ties between churches and seminaries. A widening gap has emerged in the relationship between theological educational institutions or seminaries and the churches by both theological educators and church leaders. And this creates much ambiguity in the purpose and direction of our training. And of course, church exists to advance God's mission in this world. And theology schools exist to serve the church by building healthy leaders. Jesus said that I will build my church. So Jesus has only one mission, building his church. Therefore, I believe the theological educational institutions should facilitate the multifaceted ministry needs of the church. There's a saying that as seminary goes, so goes the church. But a lot of criticism came against the theological education, especially with the dawn of third millennium. The evangelical institutions took seriously their heritage of training as formation for ministry and mission with academic excellence till 1990s. However, after the mid-90s and into the new millennium, the divide between the church and theological institutions has widened. The students' vision in many cases has changed. It's a normal pattern to hear at the graduation exercise that nearly 60% of our graduates are aspiring for further studies rather than ministry. Or again, they want to add one more degree. Then they do prefer some sort of dignified ministry. The real danger we faced in our training, especially with an IBS, was the overemphasis of academics and neglecting the spiritual, ministerial, and personal formational elements. We asked several questions to ourselves, and we found that we have enough mechanism to satisfy our accrediting bodies. We have enough mechanism to assess the academic formation, but what about the ministry formation, spiritual formation, and personal formation? We believe in academic formation and we believe in academic excellence, but that should not be at the expense of ministerial and personal formation. Recently, a graduate of a well-known seminary shared the mental shock he had felt listening to a lecturer questioning the authenticity of miracles recorded both in the Old Testament and New Testament. And he told me it took him many weeks to reorient his mind to the unwavering faith he had in God and the Bible. So often, 21st century's theological education seems to be irrelevant in terms of actual competencies needed for ministry. We teach them how to solve synoptic problem, but they do not know how to deal in a rural setting, North India, or in one of the South Asian countries. And many of our teachings and lectures are disconnected from the life of the church. And as I have already pointed out, and our so-called elite theological education is inaccessible for most of those who need training. And this situation posed several questions in our discussions, especially with our executive director, Dr. Alex, and many of our board members. And this situation posed several questions in our discussions, especially at the beginning of 2000. And we realized the fact that any attempt at the discussion on theological education needs to consider the questions such as, what is theological education for? What is the purpose of theological education? Does the current theological education pay adequate attention to church ministry formation? Is the existing relationship between theological institutions and churches satisfactory? Are theological institutions making ongoing interactions with churches? What has motivated the church leaders to develop alternative programs for theological training? In many of the so-called churches, they have their own seminary as intellectual center, and also they have missionary training center for the expansion and the advancement of their church ministry. Why it is? What motivated them to start missionary training centers? Do the present curricula and the method of training for various programs of theological training need to be revised and revisited? Does theological education need an accreditation from a secular university? Several questions came into our mind. Also, we could identify several mismatches and the areas of tensions, and we got convinced a much needed paradigm shift. We found that theological education claims to be serving the churches while churches complain that it's not turning out effective leaders. One of the church leaders, as I was talking with him, he told me that you people are creating intellectual giants and they are not useful for ministry. Accrediting agencies propose holistic training, while many of the seminaries fall into being mere intellectual centers. So several mismatches, and these are some of the important things, and we are convinced and we realize the fact the time has come for us to revisit our pattern of training to make it effective and not become a fossil. So, with the permission of our board and the blessing of the director, we are convinced very much for a much needed paradigm shift in our mode of training. And finally, this is a quotation from a book And we found that, yes, it is somewhat true. The only similarity between modern theological training and Jesus' training of the 12 is that both take 3 years. For BTH or MDU, it's a 3-year program. That's the only similarity. And we found that this is the pattern with the help of ATA, and we are indebted to Dr. Paul for taking many sessions and working with us in this journey of transformative theological education. And this is the model that we find. Everybody is genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So as theological educators, we found that it's our responsibility to find out their talents and to provide them opportunities to develop their God-given talents. Instead of counting all students in the same mold and mold, helping them to understand their call, their place in Christian ministry. So mentoring, a lot of things. And also we found, then as a beginning, we started to go through the educational philosophies. Of course, the taxonomy developed by Dr. Benjamin Bloom and his colleagues, known as Bloom's taxonomy, says that yes, cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. These are the 3 domains need development in any kind of education. And with ATA, we call it academic, spiritual, and ministerial, or knowledge, attitude, and skill, intellectual, character, behavioral, head, heart, and hands. So our faculty members got the privilege to go through several educational principles, taxonomies, the taxonomy that ATA, Senate of Sarambur, and ATS following. And finally, we at NIBS embarked on an adventure of faith in 2010 as the leadership and the faculty felt that something was missing in the traditional theological school model of education was as we offered. As NIA leaders started honing down on the 3 specific areas where intentional focus was needed: spiritual formation, academic formation, and ministry formation. The ConneXions model was introduced to our faculty members. The 5 C's and 4D model for leader development sparked widespread interest in considering more intently Jesus' strategy for equipping his followers. In 2012, a plan was developed to bring together all NIEA theological educators, and the following year for 4 developmental seminars with Dr. Malcolm and with Dr. Robert. And these seminars helped us to build a core trainers who could skillfully handle the ConneXions model in the theological college classroom, and at the same time mentor a younger generation of leaders who also would do the same. Is the curriculum or the learning process actually fostering personal transformation of students to Christ-like individuals? And in association with the LeaderSource and Asia Theological Association and Overseas Council, curriculum consultations on transformational theology were organized for the whole ATS schools in 16 at Pune, UBS, and again for South India, Northeast India, North India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Effective Christian leaders are the currency of change for the future, and this vision is geared primarily towards the model of ConneXions, especially with New India Bible Seminary. And I believe that the theological education is for the whole church, and it is not for the pursuit of the few to be realized leaders within the church. And it is important to note that when Paul wrote to Timothy and Titus, his emphasis was on their character formation undergirded by biblical theology. So in ConneXions model, the 5 C's and 4 C's, we try to inculcate this with our syllabus, and we developed our syllabus with this, and now we have this ConneXions model syllabus, and we could see the result, and we could see the transformation in the life of our graduates. Graduates are going gladly to the mission field, and they are very effective to face the contextual challenges, because through mentoring, we were able to equip them holistically to face the contextual challenges. But that was not an easy journey. And my wife Jessie will share with you how we could continue this connection model of training with a formal theological settings, the challenges we faced, the process, and the accomplishment. Dr. Malcolm Webber introduced to us 5C4D model in 2010. And several mission agencies and seminaries are using this model. And God used us as a catalyst of transformation using this model to several seminaries in India, Nepal, and a few in Bangladesh. And it is adaptable in formal, informal, and non-formal setting. And it is approved for its transformative impact by accrediting agencies like ATA. ATA endorsed fully our curriculum, and it envisions holistic formation and transformation. Now our faculty members are so happy, our graduates are happy, but still we are striving for the future, especially to send out, to equip a group of missionaries, evangelists, Bible translators for the advancement of the gospel, and also to fulfill the Great Commission. And now, may I request, I call upon my wife, Jessie, to continue with the challenges, initial hurdles, and the process and the accomplishment of this model of training as we inculcated with a formal setting of theological seminary. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And it is indeed our privilege to join all of you. And I bring greetings to every one of you in Jesus' name. And it is such a joy for us to have this wonderful group of guests this evening or this morning, depending on wherever you are. And thanks, Dr. Malcolm and the LeaderSource team and the guests today for having us with you. And also, we are very privileged to have our director with us and our faculty and many of our friends in our ministry. And also, we have met many of you in the past years, and it is wonderful to see your faces again. As Jason said, when I look back to the experience of this amazing journey of transformative theology. It takes me to 2000 and 2002, where we were really doing well. According to all the standards that are set by accrediting agencies, we were doing excellently well. But as Jason said, there was this feeling of a holy dissatisfaction, that we felt there is something that we are missing in the entire training process that we are doing. So we started praying about it. This holy dissatisfaction was not about any technical stuff. It was primarily to have more of the Lord in our training, to have more of the transformative reflection experience in the life of the faculty as well as of the student. So we were really passionately looking around for that presence of God. Probably I should say like that, the presence of God working very deeply in our theological educational system. And we were praying ever since that time. We had an ongoing quest for a renewal of theological education. We read books about it. We conducted seminars about it. It was not simply about fitting something here and there. It was about a complete, a comprehensive renewal of theological education. And Jason, my husband, developed a CBTL model as part of his theological education. I mean, the PhD that he did in the UK. We both, God provided us an opportunity miraculously to do our PhDs in the UK on theological education, specializing in theological education. And Jason was awarded, by God's grace, his PhD in where he developed this model called CBTL, context-based transformative learning model. And even then, we were looking for how to handle our situation. How can we improve our situation in the seminaries in India and around the globe? So we started praying, and then while we were praying, our director called some of our colleagues to attend a seminar with Dr. Malcolm back in 2010 in New Delhi. And that really challenged us. And Dr. Malcolm was talking about the organizational stagnation at some point that was really striking to me. Any organization reaches, he started his session talking about that, and that really was really striking. And any organization, any institution, there will be a point of, a period of growth, and it can be really a great period of growth, and then there is a point of stagnation, and then how we hold our forts. And that was the question he started with, and it's still resounding in my mind about theological education. And it is true maybe with many of our ministries that we are doing. And the first seminar with Dr. Malcolm introduced to us the 5C4D model, which I'll explain in a few minutes. And in fact, never think that soon after we met Dr. Malcolm or the leader source, we got all the answers for our questions. No, that is not right. The ConneXions model was not providing ready-made answers. That is for sure. But what it did fantastically was, it led us to ask the right questions for a forward momentum of growth in our ministry. So that is where we found God's real presence in meeting with Dr. Malcolm and his team and the ministry. And I believe, personally, both of us believe that every special encounter of God lead us to new beginnings. And even God designs human encounters where he leads us to new beginnings, renewal, revival, where God is active in human life, and he actually aligns us to his will, that whatever ministry we do, it is nothing about positions or achievements. It's all about him. So we thank you all, and also thank God for the privilege of learning with Leader Source. The question was, what motivated us to change. We are, as Jason said, we are in a formal theological setting. And what motivated us to change? We found gaps and dissonances that motivated, that pushed us to change. Because whenever we listen to God in quietness, there will be this voice, this sweet, soft voice that's speaking to us. Maybe we are doing ministry fantastically, but only God knows where we are heading. Only God knows whether what we are doing is effective and fulfilling the kingdom purpose, or are we building our own kingdoms? We never realize it when we are busy in our ministry. So we prayerfully, God led us to find the gaps and dissonances. Certain things were not really harmonious in the training. Maybe there are gaps between the courses that we offered and the need in the mission field or in the church. We also found gaps between what the students' heart was seeking and what their mind was receiving. So their hearts were waiting for something, but their mind was getting something else. So there was some felt dissonances in the training mode, that in the training pattern that we were doing. It, whenever we say we were doing, we are not only talking about one institution. Believe me, we communicated with many friends around the world, and in many cases, everybody had this holy dissatisfaction where they were passionately looking for God's hand. Everybody were extremely busy serving and teaching and, training. But everybody, almost everybody we met, they found some gaps somewhere. Now, the gap between the seminary and the church, that really challenged both of us, Jason and myself. That really challenged. Like, Jesus is calling in our lives. Are we building his church? Are we doing this ministry? Like many in India, particularly for India, we can speak. As soon as you tell somebody in Christian faith that you are a theological teacher, you are a theology professor, they immediately say, so you are not in ministry, right? So that means in being a theological teacher, they don't count it as part of ministry. So this really challenged us. Are we doing ministry? Are we serving the church with all our effort? So what motivated us to seek change is this gap, the dissonances. Now, let me share my screen. The question that challenged most of us was, the troubling question was, at that particular point, we had to ask this question: should we go tradition oriented or transformation oriented? This was a challenging question. We had to choose between the two. We were accrediting seminary, and then this question was very challenging. We are in a tradition. We are with a large group of seminaries. And then, should we stay with the traditional systems, or should we seek for transformation? And that was a troubling question for all of us. When we say all of us, all the faculty team, all the academic administrators, then why the question was so troubling, deeply troubling, because at any point, if we embark on a change, everything was uncertain. Whether we are going to lose our accreditation, whether we are going to pull down all the structures and, lead the institution into a chaos, we never knew what would happen when we would look at this 5 C's and 4 D's and then revisit our curriculum in the college. What would happen? Everything was uncertain. So it was a troubling question. But by God's grace, we chose to prayerfully walk in the road of transformation, because we felt that God is calling us to take a journey into transformation in theological education. So asking a revisit, always led us to ask difficult questions. The questions that were difficult, not in the technical terms. We could have easily found out answers from books. The questions were difficult, particularly because every training situation, every theological seminary functions in their own particular culture and vision statement and mission statement. So we looked at, this is the goal, process, design diagram developed by Leader Source. So this diagram, we looked at this diagram, and we should, Dr. Malcolm's teachings, he says, we should start thinking from the goal backwards. And in practice, we will be starting from design towards reaching the goal. Very simple thing, but the diagram makes it very clear for us. The destination, the journey, the map. So we asked difficult questions about each of these things, about our theological function, theological education. We started looking at the goal. What is the goal of the seminary? What is the mission statement? What is the motto? What is the vision statement of the seminary? Then we looked at what is the process that we are doing towards it. And then we revisited our design. Already Jason shared with us the difficult questions we asked. So I don't want to get to that again. And what we found, that our goal is stable, solid. We have a very solid, meaningful, comprehensive goal. But the trouble was mostly with the process. Is the process of teaching and learning would take us to the goal that we have set. That was the challenge. And again, we looked at the design. We called for all the faculty to come together. And in some seminaries, principal doesn't know what is happening in the seminary, like as far as teaching is concerned. Maybe a principal or a president may be doing all the administrative things. But in our system, the principal is a teacher. Principal involves in the curriculum design. Principal does leads discussion with the faculty about everything that is happening with the teaching, so that we will be doing the process correctly towards reaching the goal. But in 2010 onwards, we started asking very difficult, critical questions. Maybe nobody else would ask because our institution was having a high reputation already. So we had to ask it for ourselves. Now we ask those questions ourselves. Is this process, is this design matching with the process? Is this design and process leading us towards the goal? For example, if our seminary wants to develop strong, committed leaders for the church, what are we teaching them? Is the learning meeting the intended purpose? So that was the question. So 4 dynamics in transformative theology. We looked at it again and again. Very many seminars we conducted with our own faculty. Thankfully, we are very deeply thankful to God for our leadership and also for our faculty colleagues who are still with us. We all stayed together. That was the best thing that happened. We all stayed together through all these years, a decade now, whenever we started this journey of transformative theology. And the 4 dynamics in transformative theology in the ConneXions model challenged us again. And the spiritual, experiential, relational, and instructional dimensions, in one of the slides like this, Dr. Malcolm wrote in quotations, the cry, the plea of a student who is applying to a Bible seminary. And that was challenging. You can read those questions, those cries, those pleas of a student who is applying, who is being admitted into a theological seminary. The student is actually seeking for a degree. That's fine. We will give them a degree. But what actually the student needs to be sustained in ministry and life is what we call the context of learning. When the content is particularly into the instructional column that you see on the screen, context is actually the other 3 columns. And without that context strengthened, whatever we teach in the content quadrant will stay dry. And it is very clear that maybe only less than 20% or less than 10% of the information that a student gathering throughout a 3-year course will remain in their mind. Many students don't even touch their notebooks, touch their notes after that. So this is challenging. The spiritual, the student's cry is, bring me face to face with God. If that is not happening in a Bible college, then we are not meeting the goal. Student has to meet with God face to face. Whatever great degree we offer, PhD or MTH or whatever, if the student is not able to meet with God face to face on personal ground, we are missing the mark. Second, let me do it. That's how I will learn it. Let me do it. Give me an opportunity every day to experience theology, to do theology. And that connection with life, that was more important. That was really important. Another one was relational. Spend time with me, mentor me. This challenged all of us as a faculty team. Frankly speaking, do we have time for students in a busy theological institutions? Do we mentor them? And particularly Dr. Malcolm's teaching on succession. Also, I very gratefully remember Dr. Robert Walter's excellent teaching, which really motivated us to change. And then this Dr. Malcolm's teaching on succession that brought us to this relational content quadrant very deeply. Are we building leaders for the next generation, churches? Now everything has changed in the world with the COVID pandemic. How are we doing this relational content and spending time with people? Are we doing it? And then instructional content, teach me the word of God, the life. And these questions, we just wrestled with these questions for days, for weeks, for months. We prayed about it. Let me go very quickly to the next. How did we change? We started, honestly, earnestly praying for wisdom because we didn't have a clue about how to start, where to start, what to do. As a whole group, we prayed, and we can testify. As both of us are with you today, we can testify with all our colleagues in ministry. We can tell you that prayer works, and it can bring transformation from head to toe, from the top to bottom, everywhere. However rigid the structure is, prayer can bring transformation. We started with prayer and we continue with prayer. And our faculty team, to whom we are very thankful, they took initiative in the 5C4D reviews on our strengths and weaknesses. And we invited all the faculty team, from principal to the freshly appointed teacher, junior faculty. We called everybody to come to a room, to our conference hall. And sometimes our top leadership also of the organization joined us to encourage us, to guide us, to pray with us. And then we sat together for months, for weeks. We took time out of our classes, and during the summer vacation, during the Christmas vacation, other vacation time, we came together to discuss, to find reviews, to do reviews of our strengths and weaknesses in our training. We also found gaps, but we discussed it among ourselves, because unless everyone in the team is part of the process of change, it won't really be nice. It won't really come up very beautifully, because there will be distractions, there will be there will be issues coming up, distracting us, pulling us backward. So we wanted everybody to come. So we didn't do the change abruptly. We had to be wise enough to go gradually, to grow slowly, to grow in change prayerfully, one step at a time. Gap identified and pondered over again. And finally, we identified that our community and calling areas needed deeper reviews. And also we identified that the content context integration in our training was either weak or partly dysfunctional. Everything was okay, everything was functioning, but we thought that for real transformation of the student, we needed content context integration stronger. And we had our long full-fledged syllabus, but all our faculty together sat together, and at the end of every person's syllabus, we prepared the four dynamics in transformative teaching: the spiritual content, the spiritual dynamic, the experiential dynamic, the relational and instructional. Intentionally, we started looking into these quadrants. Intentionally, we started making it meaningful learning experiences to our students. We took each subject and we started looking at whether we are teaching simply, giving them some lectures, and finally we are asking them to do some exams and tests. What were the challenges? There were many challenges, and you will surely have questions at the end. Heavier workload for faculty, because we were already running the institution. We are a long-standing institution, and we have been very busy with our work. And this transformative element actually added more workload in one way or other, because we needed to think, we needed to carefully move on. New design skills for academic administration and also for faculty became necessary, and design mattered, how you design your courses. And also we needed more time. Faculty members always complained, including myself, we need more time to teach. We need more time to have all these four dynamics in our teaching. But eventually we learned that it is not exactly about more time. It is about better, healthier management of the time available. So a different way of scheduling. So actually we together made new plans for that. And also there was a little resistance, at least from a couple of people. They don't want to change because this change process sounded to them like too much of uncertainty, that we don't know what is going to happen in the future. But by God's grace, everything went well. We took it slowly and we took it with much prayer. And we had to address this question of captivity to lecture and classroom. Extremely difficult in the traditional system. In the conventional education, it is extremely difficult to change from the bonding to lecture and classroom to a transformative learning collage. So that was one of the biggest challenge. And adherence to accrediting policies. We still are strongly accredited a theological education, but this transformative element is beautifully built. We should use the word like interwoven beautifully into the traditional system of education. So this is something that we did. We took, this is unfortunately in the busy work, this was taken from one of the earlier picture. So I do not know exactly whether this is the latest, but this is the kind, just to give you an example, this is the kind of revisit to a program that we did. We revisited the program in their own entirety. This is a Master of Divinity program, I mean the courses, and we listed all the courses in semester 1 through semester 6. And then we looked at each of these courses. Which C or how many C's are predominant or should be predominant in each of the teaching, each of the courses, so that we can actually have this transformational impact in the 5 C's. The 5 C's picture, if you are wondering, if somebody does not know what the 5 C's are, these are the 5 C's. And this particular explanation that Dr. Malcolm and his team has given for the 5 C's, that without this definition, we don't understand much. But with these definitions, it is challenging. When these definitions are made clear, made explicit, then the challenge comes. Otherwise, if it is presented just like that diagram to somebody, they will say that, yes, in our college we have Christ, we have chapel services, we have prayer times, everything is going well, we have community services, we have character building, we have this thing, we have calling, we build our students in calling, we have competencies, everything is perfect. All Bible schools will say, we were also like that. But when the definitions of these 5 C's came, it really challenged us. Then working with these definitions, we re-looked at our training philosophy, our training process, and our training design. Like in the first diagram that we said, the goal, the process, the design. We looked at it again and again. And then we looked at this. What are the courses that we are offering? And which of these C's should be leading in each of this course? It is not simply a teacher comes and then that teacher uses somebody else's course or his teachers or his or her faculty's notes and then come and lecture and go. That won't make transformation, we believed. And therefore we started working from the philosophy of the seminary's training, from the mission statement, from the vision statement, the process, the design. And then we started re-looking at Master of Divinity separately, Master of Theology separately, Bachelor of Theology separately. We took all the courses and we asked very difficult questions like, do we need all these courses? Are some courses not relevant? Do we need to add more courses? Do we need to add some component in the formation? And let me also tell all of us, that because we are an accrediting formal institution, we needed to build in all these formative elements, all these transformative elements, spiritual, experiential, relational dynamics, strongly built into the content. So, which was not very easy. So finally, God showed us a way which really worked very, very well. It was starting cell groups to run the institution. We had cell groups before, but we made a beautiful redesign, a wonderful design of cell group, which brought together all the C components and all the D components together. And I can tell you, whichever ministry you are doing, formal, non-formal, informal, you will be living in a particular training culture. Whatever culture you are in, you can use this model. It is not a particular ready-made recipe. It is actually guiding you to think, like the article that Dr. Malcolm shared with us this morning. So it is not the recipe, it is not too prescriptive, it is a model, and you can prayerfully seek God's wisdom. How can we best apply this transformative element in our training? Let me go quickly how we did that. Now, grading. Whenever a design changes, assessment, whenever a design changes, in fact, the process of learning change. So whenever a design changes, the process of teaching learning will change. Whenever the process of teaching and learning changes, the assessment changes. So assessment methods, we had to wrestle with that again, because us being an accrediting institution, we have to have our exams and tests in place. So what we did was, see, one of the complaints, one of the questions that many schools, whenever we introduced the CBTL model along with this leader source ConneXions model, we shared this with many other institutions. And then many institutions and many faculty asked us this question. Even without any of this transformative content, still we can be an accrediting agency. Yes, that's right. You can still be an accrediting agency without too much of this kind of trouble. But the question is, what is the quality of our faculty and what is the quality of our graduates? For the sake of God's kingdom, for the sake of the expansion of the church. And that was the only trouble that we had. And there we had to bring, and even students asked, for example, why should we take all these additional things? Why should we have all these very meticulous, very detailed, expanded activities of mentoring, coaching, visiting churches, and connected with churches? Other schools, they don't have all those things. Then we had to bring it to 100% separate assessment. In a very different way. Everything was not graded, but still we had a different way of assessment, using some personal reviews, some self-evaluation, some peer evaluation, some group evaluation, and mentor evaluation, and all those things we put together, that your transformative impact of your life is as important as your grade in the final exam. So that was a seminary initiative, and still that is continuing. And what happened? What did we learn from it all? Let me explain to you, and then I'll be done. We have learned many things from it all. One of the things was deep learning requires, deep learning, I mean healthy transformative theological education, would require a different design and process. This may not be applicable for you, but this is what we learned from our journey of transformative theological education. A transformative theological education, if we aim at that, it will require a different design and process that appropriates it. Secondly, faculty has to be moved from mere lecturing to facilitating learning status. These are two different things. And maybe I can say that in many parts of South Asia, particularly, and in many parts of other countries also, this lecturing style, to change that into facilitating style, is one of the biggest challenges that we would face in this transformative journey. Lecturing is the pattern. Lecturing and spoon feeding has been the pattern, and then changing that to be a facilitator of learning, it takes intentionality and it takes time and experience. So that was another thing that we learned. Another thing is, what we learned from this experience is 4 Ds in balance enhances passionate engagement of the student. These 4 Ds, the spiritual, experiential, relational dynamics, built strongly into the, interwoven with the instructional content. Instructional content is core. That is core, that is primary. But when we build all these other components in a very healthy manner, these 4 dynamics brought together like Jesus did, if we can bring them together, that will enhance the passionate engagement of the student. Student will show passion in learning. Student will not be doing miscellaneous things in the class. The student will be really passionately doing devotion without compulsion. The student will passionately engage in learning. The student will automatically ask questions. And when the teacher changes from lecturer or professor as such to facilitator, The teacher will provide ample time to interact with the students' questions. So every relations change when this particular transformative method comes in place. So another experience that we had was the learning context, that is the spiritual, experiential, and relational blend. When the learning context, we call it the context of learning, where the student achieves deep learning. Even educational experts in the secular, in the formal education, they have proved it through very articulate, proven research, how engagement is important, how student has to be cognitively engaged, emotionally engaged, spiritually engaged, practically engaged, and socially engaged in learning so that transformation will take place. Another thing we learned was content, the instruction, the notes, the lessons needs critical revisit in view of the 5 W's and 2 H's. Like Jane Vella, Lee Schulman, we know all these people who were educational specialists, and they have introduced to us all these theories. But then when we look at it through the Christian lens, through the gospel lens, how can we improve? 5 W's, why, what, when, where, who. All these things are who is very important. Who is the student? And all these things, how and how much and how many, and those things related to the content analysis is very important. And also, ministry engagement should not be a technical item list. Ministry engagement and community engagement. Community is not only society outside. That is one thing that we learned from this ConneXions model. Community is strongly inside. Community is both outside and inside. And then how to build that. And it is not mechanical item in the list. It has to run through from day one till the graduation. And the student should be integrated in the community, wherever he or she is from, throughout their life. So that was another lesson. When the design changes, assessment also changes. And shifting from tradition to transformation in formal setting is hard, but not impossible. Thank God for that. And my final slide is this, before we get into the questions. What were the fruits of the change? The seminary community started exhibiting more Christ-like behaviors. Instead of so much of control, instead of so much of frictions and fractions, people started to show Christ-like behaviors naturally, organically. Prayer, humility, forgiveness, love, and all those things. And that's how we started feeling abundant life. We were not too much pressurized about completing the syllabus, but we allowed the work of God to happen in the educational process. We had prayer time even in the middle of the class. We started listening to the tears, looking at, sharing the tears of our students, listening to their hardest experiences in the class. And that's how we developed, started experiencing abundance of God's life in our community. And learning became a meaningful and passionate experience, not burdensome. It was not like teacher is imposing and student is at the receiving end. It was like we all were together in the transformative process. Students became active participants in learning. They were initiators in learning. I recollect when I talk, I recollect many situations when students were actually leading the teaching, leading the experience sharing. And we had exhibitions of Old Testament events and New Testament and, child development and mission related exhibitions, and where students were actually leading the learning and the teaching session, which was really fantastic. And fruitful ministry engagement for students and faculty. This fifth and sixth points are important. transformation was not only for students. It cannot be possible. The transformation was from the leadership. Transformation was with the faculty. And when the faculty transformed, the transformation actually saturated the rest of it. So everybody was together being transformed. That was God's work, no human work. Stronger church seminary relationship we experienced, and better impact on the kingdom work. And assessment became not burdensome experience only of examinations and grades and making people fail or pass, but assessment runs through the whole training, and assessment really turned out as a useful tool guiding for further growth. Assessment became a corrective measure for faculty and students. This is how the Lord help us to take this journey. Thanks very much once again. Thanks for listening. And we welcome your questions or your comments. And I just hand this over for the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Wow, my goodness. So, thank you, Jason and Jesse. That was very, very rich. We just heard a tremendous amount of very deep thinking, deep reflection, the practice that our friends have done over the last decade. Let me give just a couple of perspectives here before we dive into some Q&A. You may be looking at this and feel a bit overwhelmed. And so please, a couple of things you must keep in mind. This is a decade of work that Jason and Jesse and their entire team have moved through. This is not something that you're going to achieve just, quickly. Also, this was a large, very successful, very highly regarded seminary with strong existing culture and strong ways of doing things. And what our friends at NIBS have accomplished in changing the culture of this large seminary is really an extraordinary example of leadership. And I want to highlight that. And in particular, the top leader of this ministry, Dr. Alex Phillip, a very dear friend of ours, and the visionary leadership that he gave, having brilliant people like Jason and Jesse with a tremendous passionate vision for change is great, but if their leaders are not allowing this and encouraging this and empowering this kind of deep reflection and profound systemic change in the organization, it's not going to happen. And I want to really affirm that, not only with Alex as the top leader of the whole ministry, but also the board of NIBS and NIEA. The visionary leadership that the board gave to this in empowering Jason and Jesse to be able to move ahead with what really have been some pretty radical changes. So I want to highlight that we need to have the buy-in and the active engagement of the top leadership, always, whether it's a seminary we're working with or whether it's a church planting network. I remember the first time that I met the team from NIBS, and as Jason and Jesse just shared, we met at a training that I did in New Delhi 10 years ago. And I still remember them. I think there were 5 of them. Jason was not there. He was somewhere else, I think, but there were 5 of the team were there, and I still remember that they were at this table, down near the front. And I remember just how how shining they were, you know, and Jessie in particular. And she would come up to me in the breaks and have these very profound, you know, very deep questions. And it was such a privilege to connect with them there. And I remember what they told me in that first meeting. They said, this is what we've been looking for, this kind of a framework. And of course, they have been developing their own frameworks up until that point. But they said, you're saving us years of work here, you know, by giving us these frameworks and these tools. And they said, please, can you walk alongside us? And so in the process, we began with the board. First, we engaged with the board to make sure that there was the willingness and the buy-in for this deep challenging of what they had been doing to this point, and the willingness to embrace a profound change. Then we worked with the faculty, and there were a series of trainings with the faculty to have to nurture the change of thinking and to provide some tools. But then the real work began. And I remember when Jason and Jessie led the faculty, and they, instead of going for their summer vacation, instead they gave themselves to a deep process of evaluation and redesign of their entire curriculum. There was an extraordinary amount of work that they did. Again, don't be intimidated by that, because recognize that they already had so many, you know, degree programs and so many students and such a deep existing culture. But the willingness to challenge that just to me was amazing. You know, our work was always in the non-formal. And as I would look at the formal system of education, and sometimes I would thank God, you know, Lord, thank you that we don't have to work there, because it seemed like such a huge, impossible task to bring change. But then with our friends here and their vision and their capacity to be able to see such honest reflection and such commitment to changing things, not just adding on a little thing here or adding on a little thing there, but deeply redesigning things from the ground up, was amazing to me, and such a privilege to be a small part of this. And Jessie, I so appreciated your last slide there, where you shared the changes that you have seen, the impact of this work, the changes that you have seen in the seminary, in the students, in the graduates. Wow. Truly, what a fantastic success that you have seen. And as a result of this, then, God has given our dear friends favor with other seminaries and institutions. And Jason, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and I believe that you have now trained more than 50 seminaries and institutions in South Asia in these same models and approaches. And I'm sure that you're walking alongside some of those very deeply in helping them to bring a deep systemic change. So I want to just affirm the need for the top leadership to be on board with this, really carrying a vision for change. You know, dear friends, when you have something that's working well, which they did, the institution was highly regarded, it was doing well, but in the hearts of our friends, they knew there is something more, that there was something more in the lives and the hearts of their students of why people were coming for training, and something more in the purposes of God for the institution. The humility, the honesty of being willing to face reality and say, Are there these gaps? And what can we do to change them? Really quite extraordinary. Because honestly, most leaders, when you have something that's going well, are content just to continue doing doing the same things the way that we've always done them. It's hard work to change these kinds of institutional traditions and culture. So Jason and Jesse, I cannot tell you how much I respect you and admire you from every angle, from your commitment to God in the first place, your commitment to the highest, for not being willing just to settle for, we just keep doing the same things because, it's going okay. But your passion for the highest, your commitment to the highest, for your deep willingness to face reality and to honestly say, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? Where do we need to change? For your incredible labor. And I watched you do this over a period of years, and it was shocking to me, the work that you did, the hard work, and for your high capacity in digging deeply into so many of these things. And what a privilege to know you and to be able to labor alongside of you. Thank you for the work that you've done. And thank you for the work that you are now doing, not only in your own seminary, but also coming alongside other seminaries and Bible colleges and institutions in helping them to do the same kind of journey that you have been on. Thank you. And may God give you the desires of your heart, which is to see a great harvest, ultimately, of souls of the lost coming to the Lord Jesus across South Asia, and healthy churches being planted. But for that to happen through the building of healthy leaders, through these many precious institutions. Thank you. I admire you, respect you greatly, and deeply appreciate your love for God and your love for the bride of Christ. I think you've had a couple of minutes now to look at the questions that have been asked. And Jason, I wonder, would you like to choose some questions and dive in?
Yeah, sure. We have got several questions, and I will answer the first question that I received. That has this model helped the school interact more closely with the local churches? And while I answer, may I ask Jesse to look the last questions, 2 questions. Could you explain a bit more about how the cell group and also the assessment that is there in the WhatsApp, please? So here one question, has this model helped the school interact more closely with the local churches? Yes, that's a purpose. So usually we don't want to bring the students, the young men and women from their home and to put there in the 4 walls of the seminary, because we are preparing them for the ministry. So according to ConneXions model, we found that there is a particular instruction called that all students, or this model encourages all students to have an intercessor. So whether it is a pastor or somebody whom they trust, so intercessor, we are not asking any financial assistance or anything from that person, asking only one thing, at least they have to pray for that particular student and the institutions 5 to 10 minutes a day. That's all. That's what we are asking every day, praying for this particular student and the seminary 5 to 10 minutes, which is very easy. And usually these intercessors are pastors of the churches. And we had last year, this year, unfortunately, because of the COVID situation, we do not have any residential students, and the government has a lot of restrictions to admit residential students. In fact, our hostel has been functioning as a COVID hospital. Now we are serving the community. with our infrastructure. So till last year, we had 200 students in the campus and almost 200 pastors or senior leaders. So at the beginning, we usually start our seminary in the month of June. So mid-July, we call all these intercessors. And if some students are from North India or Northeast, and if it is difficult for them to find out or identify one intercessor in Kerala, we have churches. We have more than 100 churches, and we introduce them with one of the churches and say that, okay, could you please act as an intercessor for this boy or a girl? Usually the pastors are willing to help them and pray for them. So that's some sort of accountability. At the same time, we promote the apprenticeship model, church-based apprenticeship model through ConneXions model of training. So the student will get an opportunity for weekend ministry under the supervision of this pastor. Of course, it is a supervised internship or the church ministry. Somebody is there to supervise, and we have a department. Our practical ministry department is monitoring everything, their character formation, their spiritual formation, their personal formation. These three domains are very important as we send them to the churches. And at least twice in a year, we have mega events with all these pastors. So this foster ecumenism, evangelical ecumenism, that we call all these pastors, and we have a time of fellowship together with these students. So that's a wonderful experience. Of course, we are trying to reduce the gap between church and seminary, and we believe training in service, not training for service, but training in service. So this model helped us to reduce the gulf and the gap between churches and seminaries. I hope that I could answer that question. Jesse, second question.
Thanks very much for this question. This question asks, seeks to know more about the cell groups that I mentioned during the presentation. And it is obvious that in a particularly well set formal theological education, we don't have time. Our syllabus, our syllabi, our courses, everything is like overwhelmed.
While we're waiting on Jesse, let me add something here on the connection with the church, you know, and this is such a big deal. Leaders are built in community. Leaders are not built in a classroom. The classroom, of course, can be a part of this, but leaders are built, life is formed in the community of the local church. And it's interesting as seminaries sometimes recognize that they need a more robust context of life transformation. And so they want to reach out to churches and, you know, add a little thing here or add a little thing there. When in reality, in the life of the local church, everything is already deeply present. The experiences are there, the responsibilities are there, the opportunities for ministry, the spiritual context is there, the spiritual mothers and fathers and role models and mentors and good examples and bad examples, they're already there. And so so instead of seeing the local churches as, you know, kind of what little things can we just sort of connect with on a, you know, a bit here and a bit there, but instead look, how can we deeply engage with the life and the reality of the local churches and integrate that actually into the design of the training itself, rather than just sort of add on, you know, something here and there. The more that we can do that, the more life transformation that we will see. Jason, would you like to, oh, Jesse's back. I'm sorry, Jesse, please continue.
I'm sorry, that was a network issue, but the cell group, because we needed a solution for the lack of time and the lack of space to bring in all these things. So we thought that cell group, the interactive time together, we mixed different language students and faculty in each of the cell group, and somebody asked that question, is it the same like pastoral care groups? Maybe, but we intentionally worked on it, the design part. It took us a lot of time, and every year just to prepare the cell group file, it took a core team maybe 2.5 months, where we designed the cell group activities. All 7 days a week, the cell group was active, and students had a very different experience of community. It was real life, like coming to a formal theology classroom. Most of the students will be, acting in a particular way. But in cell groups, we provided them a free space, hospitality, time with the faculty, going out, ministering to community, enjoy life, openly ask their questions and share their challenges. Monday morning, the typical chapel services changed ever since we made the new design of cell group. Monday, instead of the regular large chapel service, we met in small groups where the faculty will only attend, listen, and students will take lead. And the students were trained in the 4 dynamics and everything. Sometimes we give them, I told you that without a design, people may not be able to do it. So we prepared a design, like in 1 week, maybe for 1 month, the students in each group will be sharing their testimony. So testimony sharing also, we help them with particular questions, so that the testimony, they will learn how to share their testimony. And then there will be interactions. So students were encouraged to share their testimony or share their experiences or lead the devotion in the 4 Ds. So that actually helped the students to learn how to minister to others through their own simple life experiences. So the students started developing confidence. Cell group, Tuesday and Thursdays, we had the same large chapel services, but even in the hostels, the cell groups were very active. Discussions, debates, very healthy debates, and so many activities like coaching students, senior students coaching the younger students, and building leaders within the system, and discussing, question answer time, free time to talk with teachers, which are all new experience. Like if a student has typical issues that they are dealing with, for example, theological struggles, they may be finding Bible is contradicting in this way, that way. So they don't have that confidence to talk about such things in a public venue. So they could actually approach teachers to give them personal time to talk and clarify their doubts. It doesn't mean that teacher has all the answers, but it simply means that we are being hospitable to our students. We never neglect their genuine doubts and questions about Christian faith, Bible, or anything related to faith. So it was like deconstructing, reconstructing, discussions, questions, cooking together, visiting churches, and cleaning the community premises, whatever was needed. The faculty will go with the students. That made all the difference. Faculty will go with the students to serve, and faculty will also engage in the cleaning. And faculty, we all felt like we are the same like our students, and we started coming out of the class and sitting on the campus. Even the venue is very important. When our mind changes, when our venue changes, the way we think and the way we approach a relationship also changes. That's why we go on, tour, and we go for we travel out. so that we will have refreshment, in life. The same thing we did. We started sitting and learning under the trees, and that gave a different taste of learning with a teacher. So that really helped. And cell group meant everything. I can also give another example that cell groups started leading the seminary's daily function. Even in the mess hall, the dining hall, everywhere this cell group started meeting. And also even beyond the cell groups, we mixed students geographically, linguistically, in very many ways, mixed students so that they will have better interaction. They are not bound to one class and a couple of teachers. So mixing with other teachers, mixing with other students, interacting with them, that really expanded. And also we had students, we had in the chapel service, the mission leaders who are recommended by our students. That was also coming through cell group. Wednesday's chapel service was changed into students' activity, totally. We actually gave them topics to develop drama or special skits that are life-changing, and students will work on it together as teams, and they will decorate the whole place, and it actually strengthened the community, the love bonding in the community. So cell group became such a fantastic experience, covering dealing with all aspects in life. And the second question, and also I can, in answer to this long question, I can tell you that the cell group design is specially made. It is a large document, but it is very interesting activities where they are particularly designed to strengthen relationships. To strengthen relationship, to deepen relationships, and not to let a person relate only with a couple of people. Let them enjoy relating with a wider community, knowledgeable people, not knowledgeable people, highly literate, not literate. And even our staff members, including the cook and security men, were part of the cell groups. They are still part of the cell groups. So that way the interaction goes. So the cell group design is made by a core team, which I was part of. And the second question, with regard to assessment, I'm curious how you pitched transformational goals alongside the exams and tests. I can tell you that we formed a separate unit to track the transformative goals. And we sat together and we thought, particularly in the case of NIBS, where are we lacking real transformation? If students are not behaving up to the expected standard of a Christian living, where was the problem? Are some students abandoned by their families? Did they grow up in the streets so that their behaviors are affected? And how can we fill in that gap? How can we step in to help those students who did not have an opportunity of personal formation? And then it is a little, it is not an easy thing, but when everybody opens up their eyes and hands and hearts, it is workable. And transformational goals we set, which are the areas, and every year we revised it. We are still revising, and every year God gives us more insights. Like when the students go out, we have this thing called exit interview. So in the exit interview and different evaluation that the student does on the institution and on the faculty and on the cell group, we collect all those things and we revise our cell group pattern and our assessment pattern. In assessment, students' feedback is vital. It is crucial. It can be critical assessment. It can be anything, but we have to have the humility to accept students' assessment of the institution and of the teachers and of the community life. Assessments, as I told you, we had a particular group working, and then every year we selected which are the areas, and always we together emphasized that assessment should cover different aspects of life. It should not be burdensome. It should be really helping assessment. And also, all assessment are not graded. we have a culture, particularly in India, that everything should be graded. Whatever I do, it should be rewarded. And that is not Christian ministry. And we have to teach the students that everything is not to be assessed and graded, and then you are going to make profit out of it. Many things in life are for your personal building up by according to God's vision and God's will for your life. So we shared this with students, and we used peer group assessment. We used spiritual coach assessment, and also students were asked to assess the spiritual coach what you expected more. So it was reciprocal. So in that way, it actually built up. So assessment was changing. Assessment was done from different angles, and assessment was also looking at whether we are heading to the goal that we set. And it is also, we developed many documents to that. And more than documents, we also casually talked with the students from time to time. That was quantitative, not only quantitative. Much of the transformative goal assessment was qualitative. I don't know whether you would agree with that, but qualitative assessment, casual talks with the students, and then experiencing the feel of transformation that is happening in the community. That was there. And also, I should add that Leader Source in the 5 C's 4 days have developed indicators in the 5 C's that we used as a very helpful tool in preparing our assessment tools. We did not use exactly the same thing, indicators in the 5 C's. What are the indicators that a student is built in Christ? What are the indicators that a student is built in community or calling? Leader Sources, over the years of expertise, they have made all these things. And the part that we did was, we just translated it into our culture, our context, and our situation in the Bible school. And many schools are using it now. So that is about assessment. Thank you.
As I told you that this is our curriculum book for MDiv, and we have one for BTH and for diploma and for MDH. But it took almost a decade to design all the syllabus and the entire curriculum. And also, we were able to help many other schools, more than 50 schools in India, and a couple of schools in Nepal, and one in Bangladesh, both Senate of Serampore and ATA accredited schools. But all of them are not using the same book. That's not the purpose, because this one is developed on the basis of our mission, the vision, the core values, and the ethos of New India Bible Seminary. We do not want other institutions simply to copy this one as a curriculum or a syllabus book for all institutions. That's not the purpose, not to duplicate what we are doing, but to encourage them and also to help them to develop a syllabus based on the vision, mission, and core values of their institutions. For example, one of our nearby seminaries who was with us in this journey of transformational theological education, instead of 4 Ds, they are using the word 4H, head, heart, hands, and habit. So that's up to them, but the idea is same. They are using it with different words. It's up to that institutions, head, heart, hands, and habit. In fact, that reflect these 4 Ds. We say 4 Ds and they say 4H. Whatever it may be, they are actually using the same model. And ATA, Asia Theological Association, is also happy with seeing such kind of vitality in the syllabus, because this brings transformation in the life of students. Also, as Jesse said, that there are a lot of, we have developed assessment questionnaires, especially for the individual students and the class teachers and the ministry supervisor and the peer assessment. So several assessments are there. And but again, all are not going to be graded, but we usually count 100% for the academics, at the same time another 100%. So if a student get pass 100 out of 100 for the academics, there's no guarantee that he will graduate. He has to satisfy the other areas which are very, very important, because we are training them for ministry, and they should be able to face the challenges in the mission field, and that is that's a requirement for our graduation.
Wow. My goodness. Fantastic. Very deep reflections there about the need for changing how we evaluate. That's fundamental here. Dear friends, as we bring our time together to a close today, again, don't be intimidated by this. You may be looking at Jason and Jesse saying, oh my goodness, these people are, this is like Superman and Superwoman, you know? And such capacity and such hard work over a long period of time. The long journey begins with a single step. It's a journey for all of us. No one has figured all of this out, you know, with some final magic form that will work for everybody. We're all wrestling with these deep issues of life transformation. And we're all wrestling with, what do we do with the institutions that we have? How can we help them in a way that is appropriate, in a way that is gentle and yet visionary? How can we help them to find a place of change and a place of greater effectiveness? We're on a journey, and we invite you to join this journey with us. Come and join this revolution in theological education, as together we walk together, we work together, we serve one another, we share. What are we learning? What are you learning? What are we struggling with? What are the questions that we're facing? Across the nations now, we are in a profound time of opportunity. And as we look at the challenges, of course, of COVID is the obvious one, but so many challenges, dear friends, we live in a day of extraordinary opportunity. Jesus came to the earth in a time of darkness, but in a time of opportunity. And what did he do? He built leaders. God has called every one of us here at this time of both darkness and opportunity to be a part of his great movement in these days. We are committed to build leaders. Let's work together. Let's walk together. Let's bring our hearts with humility and honesty before God. Let's challenge things that we may not have wanted to challenge in the past. Let's embrace the risk, the uncertainty that our dear friends, Jason and Jesse and their whole team, you know, they shared many times of, you know, the risk in doing this, the uncertainty in doing this, but we have to do it. Dear friends, we can't just keep doing things the way we've always done them, because we know there's more. And thank God for the good that has been accomplished by so many institutions around the world. We affirm that. We thank God for that. But we know there's more. And so let's trust God. Let's set our hearts upon his absolute highest. And let's work together across many ministries and many institutions, many church planting networks. And let's give ourselves to the vision of God to raise up a vast army of healthy leaders across the nations, who will build the beautiful bride of Christ, healthy churches among every people group. That's our calling, dear friends. And so we invite you all, join the revolution. Let's walk together. Let's help one another. Let's serve one another. Let's listen deeply to one another. Let's learn together as we walk on this journey of transformational theological education. Jason and Jesse, it's been such a tremendous privilege to spend these couple of hours with you, and what a work that you have done, and what tremendous impact you are seeing. And we know it's only just the beginning. Yeah, there are such mighty days ahead as we do not settle for anything less than the very best, the very highest that God has for us. It's him. It's his work. There's nothing too hard for him. We look at these challenges, God looks at them and laughs. He sees it all. He knows it all. And as we seek him and surrender to him, he will take us into the fullness, step by step.